So I want you to try and imagine waking up every single morning, just opening your eyes and feeling like you have to piece together your entire existence completely from scratch.
Like you have absolutely nothing to go on.
Exactly. You're lying there and you literally have to reconstruct your whole life using only like the random clues scattered around your room.
Right, just looking around trying to figure it out.
Yeah. You don't have that, that warm automatic continuity of who you were yesterday or even what you're supposed to be doing today.
It's all just blank.
Completely blank. You
Yeah.
have to actively build your reality every single day. And I really want you listening to this right now to try and put yourself in that headspace.
Because, this isn't just some hypothetical thought experiment we're doing here.
No, not at all.
It's the actual daily lived reality documented in this incredibly deeply personal, intensely raw set of notes we're looking at today.
Yeah, the document is titled When Everything Resets.
Right. And it's an unfiltered firsthand account of an individual who is living on the absolute edge of human cognitive and physical capacity.
It really is. And the reality they describe, this state of continuous reset, it basically strips away all internal desire.
It just leaves bare bones survival.
Exactly. And it's written in this very analytical, sometimes almost detached way, but you can feel this unimaginable burden behind the words.
Oh, absolutely. The weight of it is just staggering.
So for today's deep dive, we are really getting into what happens when systemic support mechanisms completely fail.
The crushing weight of that physical exhaustion.
Yes, and the really profound philosophical questions this raises, about memory and the concept of duty and what it actually means to be a continuous self over time.
Well, starting with the namesake of the piece, right? The overnight reset.
Let's get into that.
It's this profound disruption of human continuity. The author writes that every single day is quite literally a reset.
Which is hard to even fathom.
Right. And they actually express a lot of frustration that people just don't understand the mechanics of it. Like, people think they're just tired.
But it's so much more than that.
It is. They wake up, and whatever the mind is doing while they sleep, it just wipes the slate completely clean.
Boom, gone.
Exactly. The whole life feels completely new. They explicitly ask themselves in the notes, what was yesterday? We don't know.
What's right now?
Yeah. Let's figure it out from the environment. That's literally how they have to start their day.
It really makes me think of booting up a computer in safe mode.
Oh, that's a really good way to look at it.
Right. Like, when your machine crashes and you turn it on the next morning and the screen looks super weird and blocky?
Yeah, the resolution is all messed up.
Exactly. It's only loading the absolute bare minimum programs required to just keep the hardware from literally melting down.
No background apps, no fancy graphics.
None of it. The RAM from yesterday is totally wiped. It's just the essential code to keep the fan spinning.
Just keeping the machine breathing, basically.
Yeah. Or, honestly, it's like waking up in an escape room every single morning.
An escape room you live in.
Right, except the clues aren't like clever puzzles. They're just the completely mundane objects of your own life.
Like trying to decode your own bedroom.
Yes. You have to look at a toothbrush and actively deduce, oh, okay, I am a biological entity that requires dental maintenance.
Which sounds absurd to us, but let's actually look at the mechanics of why that happens.
Please do, because it's wild.
Well, for most of us, autobiographical memory and executive functioning are seamlessly integrated, like completely woven together.
We didn't even notice it happening.
Exactly. During sleep, specifically during REM and deep slow-wave sleep, your hippocampus is supposed to consolidate everything.
The events, the emotions, all of it.
Right. It takes the tasks of the day, files them away, and organizes them so you can retrieve them effortlessly the next morning. It literally weaves yesterday into today.
So it's basically hitting save on your life.
Exactly. It's a save mechanism. But in the state described in these notes, that consolidation process appears to be functioning differently.
How so?
It's not acting as a save mechanism. It's acting as a format command. The drive is just wiped.
Wow. A format command. That is terrifying.
It really is. So when they have to figure out right now from the environment, they are relying entirely on external cues to trigger internal behaviors.
Because there's no internal continuity to draw from.
Right. Every single action requires explicit, conscious processing.
And I imagine that leads directly to the profound cognitive fatigue the text talks about.
Oh, massively. There's this one line in the text that is just, it's devastating in its simplicity.
I think I know the one you're talking about.
They write, we showered today, one task.
Man, just that. One task.
And the follow-up to that hit me the hardest. Immediately after taking that shower, they felt ancient.
Ancient. That specific word is so heavy.
They wanted the day to be over, just to go back to sleep, to go back to the reset.
I really want you, the listener, to think about that for a second. Think about how many automated scripts you run by, like 8:00 a.m.
Right, you wake up, make coffee.
You brush your teeth, you shower, you get dressed. You probably check your phone and read 3 emails before you even put your shoes on.
And you don't even think about it.
Exactly. Now imagine a single act of basic hygiene aging you so much that you wish the entire day was already finished.
The author actually explicitly theorizes about this. They assert that the mind ages so much through the day as it tries to build coherence in how to take care of us.
Building coherence.
Yeah, and they add more than we can really comprehend.
So what's actually happening neurologically when they try to build coherence?
Well, if we look at the neurology, a shower for you or me is just an automated motor script.
It's on autopilot.
Exactly. It's stored in the basal ganglia. We don't consciously think about the sequence of turning the knob, testing the water temperature, the sensory input.
Or the sequential process of actually washing. You just do it.
Right. It's implicit memory. So it requires very, very little metabolic energy.
But for this person, without that automatic continuity,
Every single step of that shower requires active, conscious, executive functioning.
wow. So they're literally manually driving every neuron required to execute the task.
Yes. Their prefrontal cortex is burning an astronomical amount of glucose just to force the body through a routine that should be totally automatic.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. The sheer metabolic cost of that conscious processing is exactly what creates that feeling of being ancient.
So if the brain is burning out just from the coherence required to take a shower, daily survival basically becomes a brutal form of triage.
That's a perfect word for it. Triage.
The author writes that their strategy is to focus on, quote, one thing each day and just try to get it right.
Can let everything else fall apart.
Right. And, we are so conditioned by productivity culture.
Oh, completely. Optimization, maximizing your hours.
Exactly. But reading this forces you to look at the absolute foundational floor of human existence.
The bare minimum.
Yeah. When just holding the concept of I need to be clean in your mind takes absolutely everything you have, the entire architecture of a normal human life collapses.
Because think about triage in emergency medicine. It's about deciding who gets limited resources to maximize survival in a crisis.
Who lives and who dies, basically.
Right. This individual is performing psychological and physical triage on their own existence every single morning.
Deciding what gets the energy today.
Exactly. They have exactly enough cognitive energy for one successful operation. If hygiene is the operation today, then nutrition, communication, everything else.
Environmental maintenance, paying bills.
All of it has to be abandoned.
Because their baseline requires an incredibly controlled environment just to reach neutral.
The integrity of their environment becomes absolutely critical.
Because the physical space around them is basically acting as their external hard drive.
I love that analogy. It's holding their memory.
It's holding their memory, it's providing their structure. But what happens when that external hard drive starts to run dry?
Well, the mind destabilizes fast.
The notes go into detail about the approaching end of the month.
Yeah, and with it, the end of the extra structure they had gained from stocking their pantry around Christmas.
Right, and what's fascinating is the author doesn't just talk about a lack of calories.
No, they don't.
They talk about the pantry providing structure to the mind.
Literally providing cognitive scaffolding.
Oh, I'm kind of stuck on something here.
What's that?
Boiling pasta or, I don't know, making a basic sandwich seems like a near-zero thought activity.
For us, yes.
Right. So why is picking up a pre-made protein bar so radically different from throwing some noodles in a pot? Why is the simple act of building a meal the breaking point?
Okay, this comes down to the hidden cognitive math of working memory.
Cognitive math.
Let's break down the difference between choosing and building.
Yeah.
Choosing a pre-made bar is a single-step cognitive process.
I see the food, I eat the food.
Exactly. It's point A to point B. But building a sandwich is a multi-step sequential planning task.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
You have to conceptualize the end goal, hold that goal in your mind, then inventory the ingredients in the fridge.
Then sequence the physical actions, monitor the assembly process.
And manage the cleanup afterward.
That's actually a lot of steps when you break it down.
It is. And for a brain waking up in that wiped safe mode we talked about, a brain lacking executive function, Holding multiple variables in working memory is mathematically impossible.
They just don't have the RAM.
Exactly. They don't have the RAM to keep the concept of bread and meat active simultaneously while executing the motor functions to physically combine them.
Wow. So the cognitive math of assembling ingredients requires a scaffolding that simply isn't there anymore.
Right. When the pantry is full, they can just grab something. The structure is provided for them.
But when the pantry is dwindling, they have to synthesize a meal from raw components, which requires RAM they do not have.
It forces a massive cognitive load.
They do mention a rare positive note in the midst of this, though.
Oh, right. The small victory with sleeping.
Yeah, they called a small victory, where they figured out a method of rolling around in bed to find non-sweaty areas.
Which is such a small, sad detail, but so important.
It allowed them to get over 7 hours of sleep a night, which is huge. It's this tiny physical optimization that buys them a fraction more energy.
But even with that extra sleep, they note that they can feel their thinking getting harder as the food runs low.
The sleep isn't enough to counteract the lack of structure.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And the author brilliantly terms this the cascade effect.
The cascade effect. Tell me more about how that works neurologically.
Think of the brain like a city's electrical grid that's experiencing a severe energy shortage.
Okay.
When the main power station, which in this case is accessible food and structural support, when that starts to drop, the grid managers don't just let the whole city black out at once.
They wouldn't want a total system failure.
Right. They initiate rolling brownouts. They selectively shut down non-essential sectors just to keep the hospitals and emergency services running.
So as the food dwindles, the mind starts shutting down higher order thinking.
Yes. Patience, complex memory, planning, it all gets turned off just to keep the autonomic nervous system functioning.
So looking at one depleted resource
Forces the mind into a state of panic about all resources. It accelerates the brownouts across the board.
that is terrifying.
Mm.
Because normally, when humans face dwindling resources, millions of years of evolution kick in.
The survival instinct.
Right. A primal drive activates. We get hungry, we get desperate, we hunt, we gather.
The fight or flight response.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But reading further into this text, you realize there is a startling internal vulnerability here.
Something that blocks that primal drive.
Yes, it prevents that drive from kicking in at all. The author reveals what they actually call a critical flaw in their internal defenses.
And what is that flaw?
A total, complete absence of internal desire.
The terminology they use around this is deeply revealing.
It really is. They state that most of the time, they exist purely for the sake of others.
For servitude, they say. For duty and for the whole.
The engine driving this person forward is not located inside of them.
Right. The ignition switch is entirely externalized. It's located in the needs of their environment or the people around them.
So when they hit failure points, those days where they just can't execute even a single task, they don't rest to rejuvenate themselves.
They don't take a sick day for self-care.
No. They write that they pacify the self while they wait for the next opportunity to serve.
Like putting a machine in standby mode until someone else needs to use it.
Exactly. And the absence of internal desire creates this devastating physical reality when they attempt normal human pleasures.
Right. They talk about trying to do hobbies.
Yes. The author notes that trying to engage in play or art or crafts, they specifically mention doing origami, actually harms them.
It literally causes them pain.
Which is wild. They say it takes too much out of them because they're just playing through the motions without any actual desire.
The mechanics behind that are fascinating, though.
Seriously, explain this to me, because origami is just folding paper. How does engaging in a harmless, quiet craft put a body into physical shock?
To understand that, we have to look at the neurology of desire and reward.
Okay, the dopamine system.
Exactly. When you or I do a hobby we enjoy, the brain releases dopamine, and we often think of dopamine simply as the pleasure chemical.
Right, the reward you get for doing something fun.
But it's actually a potent neuromodulator that acts as a mild analgesic.
A painkiller.
Yes. It masks the physical energy costs of an activity.
Oh, wow. I never thought about it like that.
Because this author lacks internal desire, that dopamine is never released.
So they don't get the painkiller effect.
Exactly. So the physical exertion of holding the paper, focusing their eyes, and carefully moving their fingers goes completely unmedicated by the brain.
Which means they feel the raw cost of the movement.
They are flooded with unfiltered pain signals from the sheer effort of existing, without any chemical reward to offset it.
That is heartbreaking. The distraction of duty acts as their only painkiller.
Because duty is an external demand, which triggers an adrenaline or stress response that keeps them going.
But without an external demand, they just feel every broken part of their body.
Yes, they write, every pain we're dealing with becomes foreground the moment we try to play a game.
And this leads them to a highly specific, super mechanical definition of depression.
I highlighted this part. It's so striking.
We're just sitting. That's what depression is when there's no reason to press. The reason's always external.
It is a mechanical standstill. The gears are physically intact, but there is no fuel in the tank.
And no destination programmed into the GPS.
Right. Their neurology is entirely wired for crisis response and external obligation. To remove the crisis is to remove the only scaffolding holding their nervous system together.
So when they try to shut down that servitude and just relax.
The body literally goes into shock, dropping them into total apathy.
And there is this surreal paradox here regarding their physical space, too.
The way they treat their room.
Yeah. They talk about how they will put all this effort into improving their living space, making it nicer, more functional.
But they will never actually use the improved space.
Right. They only see the act of improvement as a way of serving the space.
What you're looking at there is profound structural dissociation.
Structural dissociation.
Yes, the self is entirely alienated from its own environment. The environment is the master, and the self is the servant.
They are the caretaker of a life they are fundamentally uninvited to inhabit.
That's a beautiful, tragic way to put it.
But think about it. If your entire existence is predicated on reacting to an environment you are only serving, what happens when that environment starts actively working against you?
It's disastrous.
Because their baseline requires a flawlessly optimized space just to reach neutral. So a single technological glitch isn't just an annoyance.
It's a catastrophic system failure.
The notes detail this onslaught of compounding frustrations. Their HDMI matrix fails.
Right, the TV setup breaks.
So they manage to bypass it, setting up a projector directly, which, by the way, forces them to dismantle all the previous optimizations they had carefully built.
Expending precious energy they don't have.
Exactly. And after all that effort, the projector keeps randomly shutting itself off, falsely claiming it's disconnected from the remote.
It is the cruelty of false hope.
Yes.
The environment offers a tool, demands the cognitive and physical energy to set it up, and then inexplicably revokes the function of that tool.
And concurrently, while the technology is basically gaslighting them, there's nonstop banging from upstairs.
The neighbors are doing renovations?
Right. The author calls it an assault on our senses. They can't rest. They can't get their mind to stabilize.
And the timing of this is what feels so malevolent.
The author explicitly notes that everything worked perfectly fine for 6 weeks while they had groceries.
Of course.
The exact moment the food runs out, the technology fails, and the environmental noise begins.
It feels malevolent because the psychological buffer is gone.
Explain that.
When you have resources like food, structure, and a quiet environment, you have cognitive bandwidth.
Right, you have a shock absorber.
Exactly. A broken projector is a puzzle you can solve. But when you are in the rolling brownouts of the cascade effect,
Starved of energy and resetting every morning.
a broken projector is an insurmountable wall.
It's game over.
The brain has already shut down the sectors responsible for patience and troubleshooting. The distraction mechanism fails exactly when it is needed most to mask the pain of the dwindling food.
It makes me think of playing a notoriously difficult video game on its hardest setting.
Oh, like Dark Souls or something.
Yes, your health bar is blinking red, you have zero inventory, and right when you try to execute a simple survival maneuver, your controller randomly disconnects.
And a neighbor starts drilling through the wall while you're trying to concentrate.
Exactly. In the midst of this overwhelming multi-front war for basic sanity, the outside world steps in.
But they don't step in with help.
No, they step in with an impossible bureaucratic demand.
A medical system.
Yeah. The author quotes an instruction they received from Ontario Health at Home and a dietitian. It just says, "Are you tracking your symptoms? Just write it down."
Oh man, just write it down.
Can you believe that?
That phrase perfectly encapsulates the profound disconnect between the medical gaze and the reality of chronic, multisystemic illness.
Think about the last time you went to the doctor.
Right.
And they asked you to rate your pain on a scale of 1 to 10.
Sure, it's a standard question.
Now imagine being asked to do that 500 times a day for every single bodily function, while your memory wipes clean every single night.
It's an absurd request.
The author explains that they physically cannot write with a pen and paper.
Yeah.
Their body won't let them. Logging must be done digitally.
which introduces screens and UI navigation.
Right. And to meet the medical establishment's expectations, it would require, quote, nonstop having a computer with 1 million logs checked for every action during the day.
Medication, brushing teeth, sleeping, eating, weight.
Everything.
The medical system operates on isolated variables.
Right.
It requires clean data to formulate diagnoses and treatment plans. It fundamentally treats the human body like a simple machine. Adjust input A, measure output B.
But the author points out the fatal flaw in that logic when applied to their reality.
What do they say?
They ask, how do you check if symptoms are increasing or decreasing when your whole body hurts every day? Did it hurt a little more? Was it the food? Was it the activity?
It's impossible. When the baseline is total system agony, how do you isolate a variable?
You can't.
No, you cannot isolate variables in a complex, failing biological system, especially not when the patient is experiencing profound executive dysfunction.
Which we've established they are, constantly.
Exactly. The act of tracking itself becomes a massive confounding variable.
Oh, because tracking uses energy.
Yes. If it takes enormous cognitive effort and burns vital glucose just to log the data, the sheer effort of logging is actively exacerbating the symptoms they are trying to track.
That is such a vicious cycle.
The system demands data that the patient physically and mentally cannot produce without harming themselves further.
It is a hostile architecture of care.
That's a great term for it.
The doctor gets the illusion of control by offloading the data collection onto the patient. Completely ignoring that the patient's lived reality makes that collection impossible.
So what does the author conclude?
They reach the only logical conclusion. There's no feasible way of doing it. They just have to ride through the days as symptoms come and go.
The medical model assumes a baseline of functional continuity that this patient simply does not possess.
Right, because of the overnight reset.
If you reset every morning, the concept of a long-term data log is completely alien to your immediate minute-to-minute survival needs.
So if tracking the past is mathematically impossible, and managing the present requires 1 million impossible logs, while the world bangs on the ceiling and the technology fails.
How do they survive?
Right. How does this person survive the future? The text concludes by outlining an incredible, chilling psychological mechanism.
I know the part you mean.
The author says that when they reach these impossible points, they deal with it by waking up the next day, quote, losing a lot of what we used to be.
They function simply as some new thing designed to fit this new moment.
Yeah. And notice the pronoun usage there.
Throughout the whole text, the author consistently uses plural pronouns. We shower, we wake up, let some other version of us do it.
It's never I, it's always we. Why is that?
Well, in trauma psychology, this points to structural dissociation or compartmentalization.
Okay, break that down for us.
When the continuous, singular I cannot bear the totality of the physical burden and the trauma of existence, the mind fractures the experience.
It breaks into pieces to handle the load.
Right. It creates functional compartments. The author is describing a process of deliberate, ongoing psychological fragmentation.
So they are actively doing this to survive.
Exactly. To survive the crushing weight of the present, they are actively shedding past identities, desires, and versions of themselves.
Leaving them behind in the overnight reset.
Yes. The entity that wakes up today is a stripped-down, highly specialized tool designed only to endure today's specific suffering.
Some new thing designed to fit this new moment. It is a tragic way to view your own existence.
It's deeply tragic, but it's highly adaptive.
And it leads to this bizarre, fascinating observation about relationships and history.
The part about debts.
Yes, the author writes, when you live every day as a new day, you don't use the past or history to demand things of people. You don't feel things like debt and obligation the way others seem to.
Because human social structures are entirely built on the continuity of time.
Right, like, I did a favor for you yesterday, so you owe me today.
Or you hurt me last year, so I am angry at you now. All of human interaction is governed by this invisible ledger of historical debts, grudges, and obligations.
But if your ledger is wiped clean every night, you literally cannot hold a grudge.
You cannot enforce a debt.
You are entirely released from the interpersonal economy of guilt and obligation.
It's this strange, almost enlightened silver lining to an otherwise agonizing condition.
It really is. You just exist presently without demanding that the past justify the present.
But the cost of that enlightenment is the obliteration of the self.
Yeah, the author's final stated strategy makes this brutally clear.
What do they write at the end?
They say, so we'll just do our best. Do one thing at a time today, try and survive, shut the self down more, become less and less until eventually something changes, and hope who we are isn't completely broken.
Shut the self down more, become less and less.
They're purposefully shrinking their footprint in reality.
It is the bravery of purposefully becoming less as a form of armor.
Wow, becoming less is armor.
If the world is a crushing weight, the only way to survive is to present a smaller target. You reduce your desires, you reduce your continuity, you reduce your demands on others.
Until you are nothing but a resilient point of pure, immediate survival.
Exactly.
We have explored an incredible document of human endurance today.
We really have.
We've looked at a life lived in daily resets, navigating the staggering cognitive math of simply building a meal.
We've seen how the lack of a stocked pantry initiates a cascade of rolling brownouts in the brain.
We've examined the painful reality of a life devoid of internal desire, where the lack of dopamine turns a simple hobby into a source of physical shock.
And we've witnessed the hostile architecture of a medical system that demands impossible data from a person who ages a lifetime just taking a shower.
And finally, we've unpacked the ultimate survival mechanism: shedding the self, dropping history to become a smaller, more durable object in the face of suffering.
It forces us to understand the absolute limits of human cognitive endurance.
It really does.
And it serves as a stark reminder of how much of our continuous self is actually a luxury afforded to us by stable environments and functioning memory.
It leaves me thinking about that very first image we started with.
Waking up, the slate wiped clean.
Right. Piecing together the world from scratch. We spend so much of our lives, all of our energy, really building our identities on a foundation of memory.
Holding on to the past.
Yeah, we hold on to the past with a white-knuckle grip to enforce those debts, obligations, and expectations on ourselves and everyone around us.
We use our history as a weapon to demand things from the world.
And as a shield to protect our egos. So I want to leave you, listening right now, with this final question to mull over.
It's a big one.
If you were forced to drop that history every single morning, if you truly lived without the weight of yesterday's debts, expectations, and grudges, would you feel a profound, terrifying loss as who you are? Or would you finally discover what it actually means to be completely unburdenedly present? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time.